Can you tell me where my country lies? Said the unicorn to his true love's eyes. All I need is a TV show.
Genesis is really about the three of us sitting in a room, composing, recording and writing together.
This is the time. This is the place for the future.
The song I Can't Dance comes from, we talked before about this being a sort of something to do with the Blue Jeans commercials.
I can dance, I can talk. The only thing about me is the way that I walk.
Throwing it all away.
The secret.
Throwing it all.
Oh, the music. Are we being serious for a bit? Yeah, for a bit, yeah.
No, with me, I will stay with you, stay with me, just one single tear.
Hi guys, welcome to a brand new episode of AB in the Films. Well, you're probably wondering, if you're Facebook friends with me, why the hell hasn't he reviewed this movie yet if he loves this band so much? Heck, I've actually done a video about Genesis earlier this year about how the first time I experienced Genesis and when I started getting into Phil Collins music. You're probably wondering, yeah, why hasn't he reviewed this movie yet? Well, I'm reviewing it now. Here is the issue. I was going to review another certain film that's playing in theaters right now. It's getting a lot of good press, I believe, and a lot of people have already seen it, and quite honestly, I wasn't actually thinking about seeing it anyway. The only reason I wanted to go see it is because I needed something to fill up the episode list to get up to episode 100. This is episode number 98, I believe. So I just really wasn't in a mood to see it, and I wanted to talk about a film that I really am passionate about, so I decided to talk about this movie instead. Come to think of it, I never really reviewed documentaries that much on this show. I've only reviewed, like, documentaries, like, once or twice, I think. I think one of those was the Eagles documentary about the band, the Eagles. But I'm going to tell you something right now, guys. Very quick and easy synopsis of what I think of this movie, and then I'll go into everything else. And it was okay. It was good. It was good. I usually don't say that about documentaries. Usually I think documentaries are fantastic, but as for Genesis, Sum of the Parts, I thought it was a perfect title for this movie because it only does talk about some of the parts. It doesn't talk about everything. And yet it does. Okay. Quick overview of it. It was okay. It was okay. It could have been better. But then again, alright, so here's my biggest problem with this movie. It's an hour and 30 minutes long. An hour and 30 minutes long. Okay? And they go from 1969 to 1992. Okay? And they even talk about, and if you're a Genesis fan, you know what I'm talking about. They even talk about the years pre-1969 up to when Peter and Tony and Mike and all those guys, when they formed the band. And they even talk about the solo careers of not just Peter Gabriel and Phil Collins, but of Mike Rutherford when he was with Mike and the Mechanics, and Tony Banks, and Steve, but no, they leave out Steve Hackett. So they go over the four-member solo careers. And that's it. They don't talk about Steve Hackett's solo career, which I think, Steve Hackett's very underrated, by the way. And they don't talk about Calling All Stations, which is the 15th album. They just completely ignore it. And I can understand why. Okay, so if you are not a fan of Genesis, or if you're not a fan of Phil Collins, you're probably not going to be switched on by this movie. But if you're already this movie is for the fans of Genesis, okay? And even if you are a fan of Genesis, you might not enjoy this movie. I'm not going to lie about that, because this movie, like the title says, it only shows some of the parts. It's an interesting title because that's exactly what the movie does. Like they'll talk about an album they made, and then they go right into the next album. They don't talk about, like, how the songs were created or anything. They don't go into that. And you kind of know that going in because the movie's only an hour and a half long. And we're talking about a band that's gone on for 3 decades, okay? So you kind of come to expect that. And once they start talking about the solo careers, I'm thinking to myself, I don't know if we have any time left. But, yeah, so the one thing I did enjoy about this movie a lot is the fact that I think it's the first time, because there have been many documentaries made on Genesis in the past, but this is the first time we've seen all 5 members, well, not technically not all 5, but the classic lineup, the lineup that the band had from 1971 to 1975, I believe, because in this documentary you see the 5 members sitting together. You see Phil, Mike, Tony, Peter, and Steve all sitting together in a room talking. But even when those interviews come up, they're only on for like 30 seconds, and then it'll cut to the individual interviews. So it's really not, like, I don't think you're missing much. And if you already know the story of Genesis, you already know most of everything that's in this movie. Like I said, there have been documentaries made on Genesis in the past. Some of them are very good. In fact, if you just want to know about the albums that they made, the 14, well, for me, the 14 out of the 15 albums that they made, and I'll go into that in a little bit, they have on YouTube in-depth documentaries about them just talking about one album. Like, if you type in Genesis on, and then the name of the album, there's like a 15-minute video of the members of the band talking about how they made that album and how they made the songs. Now, I think that's much more in-depth of how they made the album. Like, if those interviews had been included in the movie, we would have had a much better movie. So, yeah, this is what I think. Yeah, I just wish the movie could have been made longer. I mean, like, the Eagles documentary, good God, that movie's like, what, 3 hours and 7 minutes long? And you're probably asking yourself, yeah, it didn't have to be 3 hours and 7 minutes long, but again, that not only went into all of the years that the Eagles were in, but it went into the solo careers of not just Don and Glenn, but of Timothy and Joe and all the other members. I think if this movie had a re-edit, there should be a re-edit of this movie, because you have some stuff there, but it goes by so quick, and it's a little all over the place, and you kind of don't know. Like, if you're watching this for the first time and you don't know of Genesis, it's going to be a little confusing at times, I believe. And they go into stuff that really shouldn't have been in the movie. Like, for example, they talk about Peter Gabriel's solo career, and I'm all in favor of them talking about it. But they'll just show, like, him singing Salisbury Hill, and then they just cut to Phil talking about Phil's solo career. And then they cut to Mike talking about his solo career. And we're all over the place, you know what I mean? Like you should have at least 10 to 15 minutes talking about one person's solo career. But they don't. It's like 2-3 minutes tops. You know, like, it feels like the editor was just rushing through it, trying to get it done. I don't know. Maybe the filmmakers were told it has to be an hour and a half. I don't know. I just can't see a Genesis documentary being only an hour and a half. Because it just zips really fast, okay? Like, I remember when I saw this movie for the first time, I thought I was going to get an in-depth look of how they made Abacab, and how they made Whodunit, which is one of my favorite songs on that album. They don't go into it. You just see Phil singing it on stage from 1981, you know, with the hat and everything, and he's singing it, and then that's it. It just goes into the next song. Now, there are some parts in the documentary where they'll talk about how they made certain songs like Mama and Home by the Sea and even I Can't Dance. But they don't go into other stuff. Like, I was hoping they would talk about No Son of Mine, Jesus He Knows Me, Land of Confusion. They don't go into that. I mean, like, here's something I'm glad they did go into. They went into how they made the Land of Confusion music video, which I was interested in hearing about. But, you know, they don't really talk that much in this documentary. They do, but it's edited. You know, I really want to see a director's cut edition of this movie. I really do. So, those are my thoughts on Genesis, some of the parts. And if you're a Genesis fan, it's hard to say, because I'm a little bit mixed on this movie. Because on the one hand, it does give out information about the band in a nice, wholesome way. But the problem is, there's just so much information in a short amount of time. You see what I'm saying? It's just, I don't know. It's hard for me to recommend this movie because I love this band so much, and I did enjoy this movie as I was watching it. But there were some things I wish they had put in. And like I said, as for Calling All Stations, okay, for those of you who don't know, after the album We Can't Dance came out in 1991, it was just Phil Collins, Mike Rutherford, and Tony Banks in the band. That was it. They did the tour for We Can't Dance in 1992 and into 1993. In 1996, Phil Collins left the band. He officially left. And he's been in the band since 1971, okay? He left the band in 96. In 1997, Tony and Mike were the only members left, and they decided to get a new singer. Now, this was the second time Genesis was getting a new singer, because they did it with Phil when Peter left the band, because Phil came out from behind the drums and started singing. He still played the drums, but he was now the singer. So Mike and Tony got this new singer, and they had to write songs that were different because they couldn't write for Phil's voice anymore, because this new singer, I think his name is Ray Wilson, I could be wrong about that, his voice is not the same as Phil's. It's kind of low. See, Phil and Peter kind of had the same, I don't know what the word is, but they almost sounded similar, so the music stayed the same, you know what I mean? But now they had to write different music because of this guy's voice. And the songs are really not that memorable. I know a lot of people immediately dissed that album when it came out. It was a major flop because Phil wasn't there anymore. But some people, from what I hear that some people do like that album, but they completely, like they didn't talk about it in the documentary. As soon as they started talking about the album We Can't Dance and the 1992 tour, boom, they fast forward right to 2006 when Phil got back with Mike and Tony and they did that reunion tour in 2006, 2007. It cuts right to that. So, like, I mean, yeah, I know a lot of people don't like that album, but they don't even talk about it. They act like it didn't even exist. And to some people, yeah, some people don't want that album to exist, Calling All Stations, which is technically the last album. But for me, the last Genesis album was We Can't Dance. I mean, guys, let's be honest, that was the last one. But, you know, so yeah, like I think they mistook a lot of things, but on the whole, it was okay. It was okay. But if you're a Genesis fan, there are better documentaries out there. Like I said, you know, watch the documentaries, these 15-minute videos on YouTube of Phil, Mike, Tony, and sometimes Peter and Steve talking about the albums they made. Like if you type in Genesis on We Can't Dance, or Genesis on the Genesis album, or Genesis on Duke, or Abacab, or A Trick of the Tail, or Wind and Wuthering, or And Then There Were Three, you know what I mean? Like, look at those. There they talk about the music and how they came up with the song. Well, technically what I would say is, listen, here's what I would say. Listen to the songs first. Find any Genesis song. I don't care if it's Peter singing or Phil singing. Find a Genesis song. Listen to the songs. Watch the videos on how they made the music. Then watch this documentary and then judge it for yourself. Because, for me personally, this movie could have been longer. And it could have been better. Could have been better. But, for what it is, it's okay. I'll say it's okay. So that's my review on Genesis Sum of the Parts. And I will see you guys in the next episode. Later.